Hi, everybody. My name is Liran Chemovich, and today I'll be talking about managing software development in a high compliance environment. Keep in mind, as you're seeing this talk, I'm going to be right next to you in the chat. So if you have any questions or anything comes up, just write in the chat and I'll answer it. It's going to be a bit odd watching myself give the talk live, but let's go for it. Now, before I get started, right now, just a few minutes ago on this same DevSecOps track, John Willis gave a talk about achieving governance through DevOps. And this is actually quite special for me because about 4 years ago, as I was just heading into DevOps, I took a class by John Willis, an online class at EDX. And much of what I know about DevOps came from him. So it's a bit of a special moment for me to give a talk after him right here. And keep in mind the talks have a lot of stuff in common. So I'm hoping I'm going to be interesting and educating right after him. So good luck to us. Let's start. As I mentioned, my name is Liran Chemovich, and I'm a co-founder and CTO at Rookout. I'm an advocate of modern software development methodologies such as Agile, DevOps, and Lean. And before founding Rookout, I spent about a decade doing cybersecurity for the state of Israel. I've done multiple roles as a cybersecurity researcher, developer, team leader, project and product manager. And moving into Rookout, and I also got to know a lot about compliance. And at Rookout, we've actually done a lot of compliance, especially for such a young company, under 3 years old. And along the way, we've picked up HIPAA, SOC 2 Type 2, ISO 27001, as well as GDPR and CCPA. The reason we've gone through so much compliance is the way Rookout works with our clients. To give you some context, Rookout is an SDK that gets deployed on our customer's environment, whether that's dev, staging, or production, and can be used to extract data on the fly without having to write more code, redeploy, restart. Now, getting our customers to deploy us in those environments requires both a lot of trust and for us to meet their compliance and legal needs. And that's kind of how we got so deep into compliance so early. Now, about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, as we were just starting our first compliance, SOC 2 Type 2, I was sitting down with our head of DevOps at the time, and he shared with me his story from one of his previous employers, where as they were going through SOC 2 Type 2 compliance, it got so bad developers couldn't do their work and you almost quit. And let's say this wasn't the most encouraging thing for me. And as we all know, to get developers doing their job, especially in modern, small, agile organizations, you want them to be empowered. I think the best way to take a look at it is through this State of the DevOps report, one of the most important stores of knowledge for DevOps today. And this quote by Nicole and team says, our own research has found that an organizational culture that optimizes for information flow, trust, innovation, and risk sharing is predictive of software development organizational performance. And so we are trying to empower our developers. We're trying to shift left. We're trying to give them as much as possible. At the same time, take a look at this quote about governance. This quote is by Reed Eschler from Align Org Solution. And what he's saying that in business, we often use the more politically astute term, governance instead of control. Now you can go ahead and read this article online, and you can see that Reed does go and challenges that governance doesn't have to mean control, and there are different approaches to it. But traditional forms of compliance with change boards and all that's involved has been about control. It has been about you as an executive telling your employees what to do, how to do, when to do. And we're looking at Agile and DevOps, that's not what we're trying to achieve and not how we're trying to achieve it. And so we have to figure out how to achieve governance without control. And that's actually possible. The two thoughts are not the same, the two words are not the same. You can achieve governance by defining the ground rules for your team. You can empower them to achieve whatever is needed to do to keep your code secure and compliant. You just have to have the measurements in place, the boundaries in place, and know when your team, when your engineers are going out of bounds. You have to know if somebody is hacking your system. You have to know if something is going wrong, but you don't have to control everything. You just have to lay the ground rules. And there are so many principles of DevOps out there. For this lecture, I've picked this one from the See the Whole blog. It shows 6 different principles of DevOps: social aspects, automation, quality assurance, Linux, sharing, and measurement. And as you can see, some of those principles, such as social aspects, trust, and sharing, are not well aligned with control, because you're trying to empower, you're trying to trust, you're trying to enable. On the other hand, a lot of the other stuff, such as quality assurance, measurements, and to a certain degree automation, actually work well hand in hand with governance. And so you have to de-escalate this conflict. You achieve governance through DevOps, kind of like John said, without trying to achieve control. And throughout this process, I've had my own little framework for trying to figure out how to do that. And I want to share it with you today. So this is my way of implementing governance through existing DevOps, which has served us through multiple compliance cycles. So whenever you're doing compliance, whether it's from an external auditor or some internal auditor or some instruction from your boss, you're going to get a requirement. That requirement is going to ask and going to require you to ensure that something is being done in a governed and predictable way. You have to ask yourself, is this currently met through an existing DevOps process within my team, within my group? If this requirement is currently met, then you're golden. All you have to do is document the way you're meeting that requirement through an existing process. And that's it. On the other hand, you may find that this requirement is not currently being met by your existing DevOps process. And so that raises a question. Why? I mean, DevOps is all about continuous learning. Now, think of it as a learning opportunity. Somebody is telling you this requirement is required, this requirement is necessary to avoid a business risk, to avoid a business risk for your business, to avoid a business risk for your clients. Do you agree with them? Do you think this poses a significant risk? If so, then you've just learned something. There is a new risk. Maybe it's a result of a new market or geography you are targeting, and you have to meet this risk, but you can do it the DevOps way. Don't mitigate the risk by adding a change board or a manual process. Mitigate the risk by automating, by shifting left the responsibility onto the developers, by measuring for the risk. And so once you've met the risk this way, all you have to do is document it and share it with the auditors. Now, sometimes once you understand the risk, you might find that this risk is not significant for your business, for your product, for your platform. And so in many cases, you can just go ahead and document it as an acceptable governance risk. I understand what is the risk we're trying to govern. I understand the control that's being required, and I feel that the existing condition is good enough. Now, you'd be surprised, but in many cases, once you're proficient, once you understand the compliance, once you understand your processes and the business, then you can quite often convince the auditors and your clients that the risk truly is acceptable and is not worth the time and effort to fix it. Unfortunately, in some cases, that's not going to go so well. And at Rookout, there's been a handful of cases where we did have to implement controls we didn't feel it was precisely necessary just to meet the governance controls. As an example, we've always felt that physical security at our offices were not significant for the security of our services. All the laptops were encrypted, password protected. We are using MFAs to log in, and so on. Unfortunately for us, one of the compliance auditors we've met didn't agree to budge on this requirement, and so we've had to upgrade our physical security to meet a higher standard, even though for us it wasn't our best judgment. But at the end of the day, throughout this entire process, developers at Rookout were almost not impacted at all by the compliance processes we went through. Now, through this process, through this framework, we've ended up achieving compliance through three main pillars. Let me share it with you, with the first being automation. Now, we're in a DevOps conference, and everybody is going to be speaking about the value of automation today. And they're going to say about how it saves toil, how it speeds things up, how it provides more consistent results, and all that is true. In our case, from a security and governance perspective, the most important thing is that everything we've said about the difficulty of empowering people, yet trusting them, yet setting boundaries and keeping that balance, well, that's not true with machines. Machines can be very easily governed through control. You write a script, you control it. And so machines are very predictable and allow you to very easily be governed. On top of that, when you automate for security, think about how can you remove privileges from employees, from engineers. Instead of giving people access to production environments, you can often just have scripts do the job for them. And so you don't have to give as many privileges to people. And so this is the way we've done it at Rookout. We grant all our employees permissions to an automation portal. In our case, the automation portal is a Jenkins cluster. Your mileage may differ. And each employee gets log in to that portal and gets access to various jobs based on his needs. Anything that's being automated is done through the portal, whether that's provisioning environments in Kubernetes, scaling up and down cloud resources, spinning up machines, backupping databases, and so on and so forth. Now, everything that's happening throughout this process, employees logging in, employees triggering jobs, as well as the actual work of the jobs, everything is being audited to logs. And so we have full governance over the process. And at the same time, we don't have to give our employees access through SSH, through administrator access, through privileges to production environments. But the best of it, that employees don't see this as something that's there to depower them or hurt them or prevent them from doing their jobs. On the other hand, this is empowering employees to do their real job and save on toil. Now, there are a whole bunch of automation candidates, deployments and releases, provisioning and deprovisioning environments, system and integration tests, maintenance and cleanups, and backups and restores. And that's no different than stuff you would automate for dev and ops perspective. The only thing you have to think through is what do I have to automate so that I can give less permissions to less people. And by giving less permissions, you are improving your governance. Now, the second pillar at Rookout is CI/CD and GitOps, essentially taking automation into the next level, baking it directly into the work processes at the company. Now, as I mentioned, it's a DevOps conference. People are going to be speaking about CI/CD all day long. There's even this new CI/CD offering from JFrog, which I'm sure that you're going to hear a lot about today. So I'm going to let other people discuss it. I do want to share with you the value for CI/CD in governance. And there's quite a bit of it. First, you get a single source of truth. By putting everything in Git, then you can always go there and see what was the configuration, what was the code, what was deployed, what and where, and how things are going. Second, you're shifting left. Instead of adding all those governance requirements on the application after it's been written, after it's been tested, after it's ready for deployment, you shift left as much as possible. Require your developers to build a secure governed application from day zero. Put every requirement you can on them and challenge them to figure out how to write the code and how to test it in a way that ensures it's being governed. And you actually already have a native mechanism to do that. Pull requests by default include both a human and machine processes for evaluating the code and evaluating the change. And just like you test for bugs and you test for readability of the code, you can test for any security requirements through the pull request. And you actually have everything is recorded. You actually know who opened the pull request, who approved it, how was it being tested, and making sure everything was good. And best of all of those existing work processes and controls are already in place. Most of your teams already know how to work this way, how to use it, and you're not making any changes in their day-to-day life. You're just requiring them to do a few extra steps through the pull request, which are mostly automated. And as I mentioned, everything is audited, both the changes in the Git and the source repositories and the changes being done through CI/CD. Everything is audited. You know exactly what happened, why, who triggered it, and so you can easily provide it to your auditors as proof. Now, the third pillar for achieving compliance is monitoring and observability. Now, there are two reasons for that. The first reason, which I'm not going to spend much time discussing, is that to ensure compliance, you actually have to know what's going on. You have to collect the information from your environments to know, for instance, if your governance require uptime monitoring, you have to monitor for uptime. If you making other guarantees, then you have to monitor for those as well. But even more important than that, you have a production environment. Well, everybody in your organization wants to know what's going on in that production environments. You have business people, sales and marketing looking to know how many people sign up, how much they're paying. You have product and user experience folks who are trying to learn how your users are using the system, what's being used more, what's being used less, what's more intuitive or not so much. You have ops and security people trying to make sure the system is up, secure, working as expected. And last and definitely not least, you have developers, which are often your biggest source of danger here, because developers require a different piece of data every day. Whether it's to fix a bug or develop a new feature, developers' daily data requirements change. While all the other groups I've mentioned tend to require the same data day in, day out, developers' needs change based on the tasks they are working on, which often leads many of us to grant them excessive access to production just to see into the code. And by doing that, we are hurting our governance into production. And so make sure you have monitoring tools in place to ensure everybody gets the data they need without having to access production directly in ungoverned ways. Make sure you have business intelligence tools for the business folks. Make sure you have logging and APMs for security and ops people. Make sure to have error tracking for engineers, and send as much data as you can from your application to whoever needs it. Obviously, you have to make sure that all those monitoring tools are also secure, have access controls, and so on. One of the nice things about Rookout is that we use our own product to allow our developers access to the production environments to collect data as needed in a secure and audited manner without granting them direct access to the production servers themselves. Now, building your observability and monitoring is a big topic, and a lot can be said and written about it. There might even be a few talks today about it, and there are definitely others out there. I've even given a few. I do want to give a few pointers, especially those that are focusing around security. So start by mix and matching tooling. There isn't a single tool out there that's going to provide everything you need. You're probably going to require some mix of those, and you're going to have to keep an eye out on the scope of that from a security perspective as well. Try to get as much as you can off the shelf. There's plenty of commercial and open source software that you can use. But at the end of the day, you sometimes have to do it yourself, whether to put some duct tape around it to bind it together, or just develop a little something for yourself. Try not to do it yourself too much, unless truly necessary. Make sure to redact data. You've just went through an entire ordeal to keep your production secure, to keep your production governed, and make sure you know what's going on there. So make sure that the data coming out of it is being redacted based on its sensitivity and where is it going, so that you're not accidentally sending data under compliance to non-compliant systems. And last but not least, make sure to have retrospectives. At the end of the day, there is no better way to figure out what you need than by seeing what you needed in the past. Now, especially when you have production issues and data is needed, then everybody needs to step in, use the permissions they have, and extract the data from production to fix it. But once the dust settles down, have a retrospective. Think through it. What data was missing? What data did you have to take riskier activities from an ops or security perspective to get? And how can you make sure that next time that data will be available faster, easier, and to people who might not have as many privileges as the ops people? Now, so that's all I had for today. As I mentioned, I'm right here with you in the channel, so feel free to ask more questions. Check us out at rookout.com and feel free to follow me on Twitter, Liran Last.